Okay, all you animators out there, today we're going to be making silicone hands. Wire armatures inside, and we're going to be casting a flexible silicone rubber on top. So one of the first things we do is we make the wire armatures. It's wire with epoxy putty in the palm on top of the brass stock. Okay, and then what we do is we register these armatures inside the mold so that the wire is suspended in the center of the volume of the castings. Okay, and what we also do too is that once it's aligned, since we're going to be pouring silicone in here, we're going to lose the registration, so we put this little mark back here so that we know every time we put the armature in, it's going to be registered in all of the around all the edges. Okay, that's what we call the mold prep. So now these guys are bent and configured so they fit in the mold. We have a registration device, and now we're going to mix the flexible silicone material. Okay, so the silicone we're going to be using is a Reynolds or smooth-on product called Mold Max 10T. This is a mold making silicone rubber. There are a lot of different kinds of silicones. Some people prefer to use the really flexible kind like dragon skin, but we find for small pieces like hands and fingers it's better to have a more stiff, a more substantial density of silicone. So we use this one. And then what we do is we mix a batch of the color. So now we have a base silicone that's all colored with the kind of pigments that we want the character's hands to have. So we now will be mixing our silicone. So let's see. We've already predetermined that the volume we need for the two hands is about 20 grams, 22 grams. So we've got our cup here. We put our scale to 22 grams and then we pour. And this is the fun part. If you guys ever worked with silicone before, it's like thick honey. Okay, for this silicone, the Mold Max 10, it's a 10-to-1 ratio, the base to the catalyst. So we have 22 grams of the base, 10% of that, we'll have 2.2 grams of the catalyst. So the total combined weight of these two will be 24.2 grams. So now we set our scale at 24.2. And now as we add the catalyst to the base, we just have to add enough so that it balances out, zeroes out, and then we know we've got 2.2 catalyst. Okay, so now we have the catalyst for the silicone, and since we have to add such a little amount, I have this little syringe, and we will draw some into it, and we need about 2.2 grams of catalyst. Now we've added that to the weight here, so now we have 24.2 grams, and then we just add it drop by drop. Keep on tipping the scale so that we know just before it's going to balance out. Okay, that's it. And we have our catalyst. Okay, so now we have our catalyst in the base, and now we mix it thoroughly. And this is really important. You want to make sure that the catalyst is completely mixed into every little bit of the base. So you scrape the sides of the cup and mix it really well. You go down to the bottom, make sure you've got all of those little corners down in the base, and mix it thoroughly. Now this silicone will take about 6 to maybe 12 hours to cure entirely. So you have a lot of time now to mix. So don't worry about taking too long. At this stage, you just mix it thoroughly because you've got the time to do it. So now what typically happens is you can pour this into the mold and wait about, like I said, 8 to 12 hours or so. But we want these hands to come out a little faster, so we're going to add an accelerator. This XLT is a special accelerator that will make this cure really fast according to how much you add. If I add 1 drop, it'll probably cure in about an hour. If I add 2 drops, it'll probably cure in about 5 minutes. And if I add 3 drops, it'll probably cure by the time I start stirring it. So we use this little syringe to make sure we get the smallest amount in there. We'll add 1 drop at a time. Now I've done some experiments with this before, and I know for a fact that if I add 1 drop to this 24-gram mixture of silicone and base, silicone and catalyst, that 1 drop is going to give me enough working time to fill these molds. But before I do that, you want to make sure that everything is lined up, that the armatures are in place, You've got all the little tools you're going to need to put the silicone in here, because once I mix it, I calculated about 5 minutes working time for this silicone. Okay, so let's go. It's like I said, it's just 1 drop. That's it. That 1 little drop is going to cure this. And this is real important now. We have to mix it just as thoroughly as we mixed the other one, but now we have a time restraint. We have to mix it really fast. So you scrape the edges and you mix it thoroughly. I'm doing this quickly because, like I said, this stuff is going to kick really fast because I'm impatient and I don't want to wait a long time between each casting. So we have to make a lot of these hands. So now we have this here. I'm going to take this hand out, put it here, take this hand out and put it here, and now we're going to place it in here. Now the technique that I'm going to be using here is we're going to just what we call slam. We're not injecting it, we're just slamming the mold. I'm going to fill these cavities with the silicone, and the trick now is to get the air bubbles out, because you don't want any air pockets in any of these castings. So I'm going to lay this stuff down as quickly as possible. It'll start to settle, because silicone is very heavy. It'll start to settle down, but to make sure that we don't have any air bubbles, I'm going through with a toothpick and I'm actually scrubbing the bottom. Being careful not to make new air bubbles, I'm making sure that the surface tension of the silicone is now completely touching all of the bottom surface of the mold, breaking any little bubbles. You can see the bubbles coming to the top. You pop those bubbles, get these things done. So now I'm breaking the surface tension so that it actually covers the surface of the mold, so we get a nice casting, clean casting without any bubbles. So now we have to put these in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to coat this with some silicone so that when we put these on there, we're not creating more air pockets. Just a little bit. It's very messy. It's starting to cure, I can tell already. So now, using that little mark that we made before, I'm going to lay this in here and then line up that little mark. I'm going to pour a little extra on top so that we're overfilling this mold. Then we're going to compress it, smash it together, and C-clamp it, and that's going to squish out all the excess. And then this is where the slamming comes in. Everything's prepared, and I'm going to get rid of these little air bubbles. See that? Bang, get rid of them, because it's just going to be little air pockets inside your casting. Okay. And then it's slam and squish. And take our C-clamps and clamp it. Hand tight it first. Okay. And then, little by little, just tighten it up a little bit. You don't want to tighten it to the point where you crack the mold, but you want to make it really tight enough that you get a good seam. Okay. Put this right over the hand. Like that. And like this. Now I've labeled the top of the hand. This is the top of the hand. And this is the bottom, the palm. So sometimes you get some air bubbles and they'll travel to the top. What I want to do is I want the tops of the hands to be bubble free. So what I'll do is I'll turn the mold upside down. So now the palm is facing up. So if there are any air bubbles, it'll be on the inside of the hand. And that would be preferable to having it the other way around. And then we just take some cups like this and we just set it up and we just wait. It should take about, I'd say, within a half hour. This thing is going to be cured and we'll be able to open up the mold. Okay, so to check and make sure that it's cured, what you do is you always leave a little bit of that extra in the base of the cup, and you use that as like a test to see if the material inside the mold is cured. So just picking at this, it looks like the cup that had our original material is cured, which means this is probably cured. And if you got any runoff, you can kind of pull it and check and see that it's dried. So now we open it. And you have to open it a certain way because you don't want to destroy the cast. So let's see, we'll take these things off. Okay, So there's another saying, the right tool for the right job. You should have a screwdriver. So you pop it in here and just rotate it a little bit because you don't want to crack your mold. So you rotate it and it starts to pull out a little bit. You don't want to rip the casting, especially with these fingers being so delicate. Just rotate it a little bit, just very slowly. You hear the sound of it pulling apart. And you lift it up. And we have our casting. Now this material is the excess that kind of flowed out of the mold. It's flashing. And this kind of picks up the excess that flowed out. And here's our castings. A couple little air bubbles there. Nothing too horrible. You could fill it with another hot batch, but I don't think we're going to do that this time because it's on the inside of the hand. It's better to have it on the palm than to have it on the top of the hand. And now to remove them, you have to be really careful. You don't want to just pull it out because the wire will rip right through. So what you end up doing is you just flex it and you start pulling it away. You can see here, I'm just kind of showing some of the air below it. Just kind of pulling it away from the mold. All the fingers, just pull it back a little bit. So you're seeing some of the casting underneath. All the fingers, just roll it. You're just kind of squishing it and rolling it back. On the other side, again, you're pushing it, rolling it back. Rolling it back a little bit. See, and the fingers will start to come out a little bit. That's what you want to do. You want to release it slowly. Pulling back, just exposing a little bit of the underneath. And then we can pull this. And then very slowly, you always squish it and push it. You lift it up little by little. Then you have your casting with very little flashing. Because we clamped it so tightly, we have a very thin flashing on it. And the top, no bubbles at all. A few bubbles on the bottom. But overall, I'd say that's a really good casting. And then you just kind of, you take this down as flush to the surface as you can with the manicure scissors. Making sure you don't go too deeply. You don't want to create a valley or a divot. You just want to get it flush to the surface. You do this with a nice sharp light on it, a contrasty light, so you can actually see. And then to finish this off, what you do is you get a Dremel bit with the burnishing bit on it, and you put Vaseline on the seam to give it some lubrication, and you start grinding it down. You just start buffing it down, and you keep on adding more Vaseline as a lubricant, otherwise it'll get really hot and it'll start to rip some of the silicone. So what I do is I hold it with 2 fingers like this, and I rub a little Vaseline on it. Again, that acts as lubricant. Pretty good. All right. So that's a cool way to make silicone hands. So now if you want to do your next one, you have to make sure you clean out all of the little thin membranes of silicone. You take a nice soft bit of foam rubber and you kind of scrub it down. You take a toothpick or some kind of wooden tool and make sure you get all of the little bits of silicone out of the mold, so it's nice and clean all the way through, even into the keys of the mold, because if the silicone is here, when you do your next mold, it's going to stop it from clamping as tightly, and you won't get as good a seam line on your next casting. All of it. Make sure the entire thing is absolutely clean and void. And you could also take some isopropyl alcohol, kind of wipe it down, clean out the stuff that's left, a little bit of residue, all of it. Make sure it's all absolutely clean on both sides. And then you're ready to go for your next batch. Okay? Jump cut. Bink.